Okay, so this is all about loneliness, you guys, and I thought that this would be good to do on Valentine's Day because this day, man, can seriously suck and make us feel more lonely than usual. And so I want to unpack loneliness and then offer up an exercise we can do. Oh, okay, Upright, thank you for stopping by. Wah! Happy Valentine's Day. And then there's an exercise we can do to help shift our loneliness and spread a little joy around the otherwise dark day that is Valentine's Day, which is why I'm wearing black. I don't know. Yes? Yes. Okay. Yeah, and then I got cold, so now it looks like I'm wearing blue. But there was a plan to I thought so much about today, you guys. So much. All right. So loneliness. What can we do about it? What can we do about it? Loneliness, first and foremost, is not uncommon. It is an emotional experience that almost all of us can relate to and have gone through. And if we haven't, most likely we will go through it at some point. Research has shown that even short, or has indicated, I should say, that short bouts of loneliness still negatively affect our immune system. So it doesn't take much loneliness to start having negative impact on our body, as well as our physical and our mental well-being. Oh my gosh, I love that, Upright. That's so beautiful. I so appreciate how you use your creativity to give back to the world. Yeah, and you have, like, your creativity too is like the kind of creativity I wish I had, because it's like really wide ranging. Mine seems to be more limited, like to specific areas. Oh, all right. So yeah, even short-term loneliness, guys, can impact our immune system negatively, and longer-term loneliness actually increases our overall risk of mortality. Like, what? Like, an emotional state over the long term, like, can, in a very, very serious, very impactful way, influence what happens with our physical body. It's this, we tend to think of the mind and the body as separate. They are not. So, kind of to make all this doom and gloom worse, it is Valentine's Day today, like I keep saying. And it can trigger our loneliness, right? And so, evolution, hang with me here, evolution has made us into social creatures. And we have this innate need to feel connected, but many of us often feel alone or disconnected. And that's even when we're in relationships or within crowds. So you can't necessarily look at somebody's life from the outside and go, oh, they're lonely or they're not. You just don't know. Like, someone who seems really happily married and has lots of friends and a huge social network online could be the loneliest person of all. So here's, okay, I'm gonna share a link. Oh yes, I am. This is to a loneliness quiz. It's not a diagnostic tool. It's just there to kind of give you maybe an idea of how lonely you are or aren't. So if you want to do that while I'm talking, feel free. Feel free. Oh, dang. Wait. Yay! I forgot. I had an image for today. I do love you guys just the way that I am. And I hope you guys get to love people just the way you are too. So yeah, feel free to do the loneliness quiz or not. Oh wait. Oh my gosh, do not jinx yourself, Yeti dude, about falling. That is not okay. Not okay. Yeah. So the APA Dictionary of Psychology defines loneliness as affective and cognitive discomfort or uneasiness from being or perceiving oneself to be alone or otherwise solitary. All right, that was a mouthful. In other words, I define loneliness as the unpleasant feelings that arise when we perceive a lack of close or meaningful relationships in our life. Right? That makes sense. It's what we feel when we feel. It's what we feel when we think we aren't included. We don't have enough friends. Nobody understands us. Nobody listens to us. Nobody accepts us for who we are. It's what we feel when we think we're disconnected. And there's all kinds of stories and all kinds of ways we tell ourselves that we are disconnected. Okay, fine. But I'm jamming to it. Let me know if that's not enough, Mr. Scott, and thank you. I know I give you crap, but thank you. I don't think I give you crap. I just feel like I'm being snarky towards you. Snark. Meh. Okay, so loneliness it really can be dangerous. There was a, yes, I don't want to offend your delicate sensibilities in your old age. Aw, Pretzel Rocks is getting rejected today. So yeah, there's a 2000 study by John Cacioppo and a neuroscientist, Steve Cole, and they actually discovered that the genes within our white blood cells actually express themselves differently. So they're turned on and they're turned off differently with socially isolated people, and they do it differently with relatively well-connected people. So in other words, when you are feeling lonely and when you're not feeling lonely, your white blood cells, which are a major part of your immune system, are behaving differently. So your genes are being expressed differently based on the emotional state you're in of loneliness. Mind seriously blown. Okay, so when and the study found that within the loneliest of us, so I'm assuming that means people who experience loneliness long term, the genes that activate, and I'm quoting, inflammatory responses were upregulated, while those governing antiviral responses were downregulated. So when we feel socially isolated, we probably actually have an increased susceptibility to inflammation, which is it's like the trigger to a lot of disease cycles, right? And an increased susceptibility to viruses. So this might explain why loneliness can be a risk factor for our leading causes of death, as well as many chronic illnesses. And like I said, loneliness is a risk factor for overall mortality. And this is probably getting at why that's the case. So if that hasn't blown your mind enough, I'm gonna do it a little bit more. So there was a really cool article. Hey, random! Dude, let me see. Oh man, I don't have the results anymore. Hold on. So I'm gonna do the quiz really quick, and I'll just read. Hello, Durnets Burlis Philip. I'm so sorry I have such a hard time saying your name. I'll call you Dur. Does that work? Hello, hi, welcome. So we're talking about loneliness. All right, Dur. Thanks. It's gonna make me giggle. Yeah. I feel like, so remind me random if a higher score is less lonely or more lonely. That's the part I can't remember. Okay. All right, skis. Well, then hopefully you'll get value or enjoy what I have to say today for sure. I know I did. it was really helpful for me. So yes, so to more mind blowing. You feel like you should feel more lonely? My guess is you will. Like, you will probably be able to, like, willpower yourself into loneliness. All right, so there's this cool article from Psychology Today called The 10 Surprising Facts About Loneliness. And, here. All right, I just want to read these. So, fact 1, loneliness does not depend on how many friends or relationships you have. All right, so it depends entirely on the subjective quality of your relationships, on whether you feel emotionally and or socially disconnected from those around you. So in other words, it's by subjective quality. It's like what you're telling yourself about your relationships. So fact 2, this one blew my mind and then totally made sense. More than 60% of lonely people are married, right? So we tend to think, oh, when I'm in my relationship, or when I'm finally in a good relationship, I won't feel lonely. And that's just not true. When married couples no longer share their deepest feelings, their thoughts and experiences with one another, it can leave them feeling disconnected and alone. People in such relationships truly believe their spouses cannot offer them the deep connection they would like. While their fears might be correct, they may also stem from the fact that, I will go to the next in a second. Hi, Upright, you're still here. See, that is a beautiful gift of introversion, you know, for sure. And I wonder if there is like research that says, like, the prevalence of loneliness among extroverts is greater than introverts. Because I could totally see that happening. That would make sense to me. Yeah, so you're like random. Yeah. So what I was going to say about this idea of 60% of lonely people being married. My loneliest moments have been in relation to Yeti Dude, and it's not that we don't, like, I still definitely share, like, my deepest feelings and thoughts and all that kind of stuff with him, but, like, when I do that and, like, I feel like he hasn't gotten me, or I didn't get the response that I wanted out of it, that's when I'm, like, feel really alone, along with the introverts. That's why I feel the most alone, and that makes sense, because here I was being incredibly authentic, aka vulnerable, and it wasn't received the way I wanted it to be, and if I didn't feel understood, that just drives this idea of disconnection, right? So I guess I'm making this more robust, that it's not necessarily that people that are married are lonely because they're not sharing anymore. It can just also be like miscommunication, or their partner is not able to listen, right? We all can't always be there for somebody. That's why having more than one person we can talk to is really, really valuable. Or I think it's really, really valuable. All right, number 3. Loneliness distorts our perceptions of our relationships. So studies have found that merely asking people to recall times they felt lonely was sufficient to make them devalue their relationships. These perceptual distortions often cause lonely people to withdraw even further from the very people who could alleviate their loneliness. Making matters worse, their friends might be hesitant to connect as well because, number 4, loneliness is contagious in social networks. Boom! This one really got me. So loneliness has a clear stigma. We tend to be able to spot and identify the lonely people around us. One study found that over a 6-month period, lonely people were pushed to the periphery of social networks, and surprisingly, so were their friends. Being pushed out into the cold in this way has a surprising effect on our bodies. So I want to pause here because I found other reasons about the contagion of loneliness that I really wanted to share. So it appears that lonely people are less able to, and by lonely people, it's just like we all are lonely people from time to time, but like that long-term loneliness. It may be that because people who have long-term loneliness are less able to pick up on social cues of connection. So, for example, smiling and the clues that someone is giving you attention or that they're wanting to commit to a relationship with you. So if you're missing out on those signals, you are more likely to withdraw prematurely, right? Like you're just going to misread the person and think they're not interested. So this can become contagious because as you withdraw, that is communicated to the person who's actually interested in you, right? And then they feel rejected and then they start withdrawing. So there's this like negative self-fulfilling prophecy of withdrawal and loneliness that can ensue and be contagious. There's a quote by Dr. Nicholas Christakis that talks to this, and he says, if you're lonely, you transmit loneliness, and then you cut the tie, or the other person cuts the tie. But now that person has been affected, and they proceed to behave the same way. There is a cascade of loneliness that causes a disintegration of the social network. Wow. Okay. Number 5, loneliness actually makes us feel colder. So studies found that recalling a time in which we felt lonely made participants estimate the room temperature as being significantly colder. It even made their actual skin temperature drop. The idea of feeling pushed into the cold resonates from our evolutionary past, in which being ostracized from our tribes meant being kept away from the warmth of the hearth and the social group around it. Indeed, our bodies respond to loneliness in dramatic ways. That's crazy. That's so fascinating and crazy. Number 6, loneliness makes our bodies feel like they're under attack. So this goes to what I was saying about the health consequences. Loneliness causes an immediate and severe bodily reaction. It increases blood pressure and cholesterol, and it activates our physical and psychological stress responses, which is why chronic illness significantly increases our risk of cardiovascular disease. Over time, people who are chronically lonely have a much higher incidence of cardiovascular disease because their bodies are under constant and unrelenting stress. But that is not the only impact loneliness has. Loneliness suppresses the functioning of our immune system, which we talked about. Even brief bouts of loneliness impact our immune system. For example, college freshmen who felt lonely had poorer reactions to the flu shot. So even a few weeks of loneliness were sufficient to impact the immune system of incoming college freshmen, such that those who identified as feeling lonely had poorer reactions to seasonal flu shots than students who were not lonely. And here you go, guys. Loneliness is as dangerous as cigarette smoking, statistically. I need a little, alert of my mind getting blown that I can trigger, because yeah. Scientists have concluded that given all the drastic ways in which loneliness impacts our bodies, it represents as great a risk for our long-term health and longevity as smoking cigarettes. Indeed, studies have concluded that chronic loneliness increases our risk of an early death by 14%. What? 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 That is so bonkers. Bonkers face. So in case this is not, doom and gloomy and heavy enough, I'm gonna keep going. I promise, I'm gonna show us a way out of this, okay? So the number of Americans, the General Social Survey found that the number of Americans who say they have 0 close friends has tripled since 1985. And that the average number of people who Americans feel like they can actually talk about important matters with has dropped from 3 to 2. So millennials, which I am one, we seem to have the highest rates of loneliness right now. And no one really seems, I couldn't find for sure, here's the research on why millennials are experiencing higher rates of loneliness than any other generation. But I did find an article by Caroline Beaton that had an explanation that I thought was really interesting. So she thinks that the loneliness is more prevalent amongst us millennials because we are spending so much of our time online, and we're really the first generation to do that. So while the internet, and obviously we're here hanging out together on the internet, right? And I love Twitch, and I think there's so much amazing connection that happens here. That being said, while the internet can be self-soothing, it can be a good coping mechanism, it appears to have downsides, no surprise, right? And there are 4 reasons why she thinks the internet might be causing loneliness in us. Yay, random! Gold star. You have a friend. Yeah, that's so great. Thank you for making me laugh. So yeah, the contagion of loneliness, remember? So online, that contagion goes viral and so our social circles are huge, right? And they're interlinking and crossing over from all directions. So the likelihood that our social circle is being impacted by some other group's social contagion of loneliness is really, really high. Second, millennials, right? If you are one, we spend so much of our time online that we often don't have time left over to hang out with people in person. And that can be detrimental because connections online aren't necessarily as meaningful as connections in person. They totally can be. I totally think that they can be. They totally can be. But oftentimes, like, they're not. Like, you can't get a hug. It's harder to communicate with chat than it is when you can actually see somebody's reaction, and it's just a little bit more difficult to communicate clearly, which is very important and very helpful for when you're being authentic and wanting to feel like somebody actually gets you, that you're seen and you're heard. All those things that help protect against loneliness, right? And then when we are with people in person, a lot of the times we still are like connected to our cell phones or our tablets or our, like, you know, Nintendo Switches or whatever, right? Like, we like to be distracted by the internet. And that, though, drives disconnection because you're basically telling the person you don't care enough about them, about connecting to them, to put down the technology. So those are all reasons why she thinks maybe loneliness is higher in us millennials than other generations. Yes, I've never heard Xenial before. Did you invent that, or am I just totally out of the loop? I mean, that sounds like my childhood, because I feel like, so I was born in the 80s, like I'm definitely an older millennial. And the world felt analog then, even though computers were out, you know, they just weren't widely available. Yeah, we've seen such huge changes. Okay, but it's not just millennials. Adolescents and the elderly are also susceptible to high rates of loneliness. So for example, more than 20% of people that are over 60 feel isolated. So during our exercise later today, I'm gonna ask you to choose, like, think of somebody that you could maybe like connect with today. If there's somebody that's over 60 in your life, you might be doing them a really huge hug to connect with them today, or a kid, right? So, okay, last factoid, I promise, and then we'll move on to like what we can do about it. Loneliness can lead to hostility, and that can further push people away, right? This is because, okay, so I guess I would say, so why? Why does loneliness increase hostility? And I think it's because, or research thinks it's because loneliness can create like a mental state of hypervigilance where we start to anticipate rejection from others. And when we expect other people to hurt us, we start to become hostile, right? Like, we get defensive and irritable. And so that explains that. Secondarily, hostility fosters loneliness because it lets us blame other people for our emotional pain, right? It's like, it's their fault. They rejected me and they're going to reject me, and it's all their fault. Like, I'm lonely because they suck, right? And then like we just disconnect even more. Instead, like, so it kind of like, it may make us feel better in the moment and temporarily, but it lets ourselves off the hook. Only we can overcome our loneliness by taking responsibility for it. Like, nobody else can do it for us. Nobody else is really to blame. So yeah, that's kind of how hostility can further it, right? Because if we're mean, we're going to be rejected more, and then it's this negative self-fulfilling prophecy. And if we're blaming others for our responsibility, we're less likely to do something about it ourselves. No, you didn't actually. Did you really talk to operators who plug cords into switchboards? No. What? So Guy Winch, PhD, has a quote about this. He says, "Loneliness evokes emotional pain and vulnerability, as well as a fundamental feeling of disappointment in the people around us that have allowed us to become lonely. That can lead us to feel more hostile towards others and make them hesitate to engage with us at the very time we're desperate to deepen our emotional and social connections with them. So as hard as it is, and it is, give others the benefit of the doubt and try to make the time you spend with them genuine and satisfying." And remember, like, you're doing this for yourself, right? It's kind of like, this makes me think like this might verge on forgiveness territory. Like, if I'm really angry at my friends for abandoning me, making me feel lonely, it might feel like an act of forgiveness to take responsibility for my loneliness, right? But like forgiveness, it's not about them. Like, you're doing it so you feel better, right? It's an act of forgiveness you're doing for yourself. If that makes any sense. I don't even know if I could talk more to that. That feels so beyond my head. Okay, guys, how can we reduce loneliness? Because that's what I really care about today, on Valentine's Day of all days. So I hope you guys understand that loneliness isn't about the number of relationships you have or you don't have. It's about the quality of the relationships. So are they meaningful? Do you feel accepted? Do you feel heard? Do you feel understood, right? And is the relationship reciprocal? Are you able to do the same thing for them? Can you listen to them? Can you accept them? Can you hear them? It is up to each of us to take responsibility for our loneliness. It is common that when we want closeness most, we push people away, right? We must resist that urge, you guys, and find the willingness to somehow reach out anyways. Loneliness is an opportunity to connect, should we choose to accept it. All right, so again, I just want to touch real quick on authenticity because it matters here. If loneliness is the perceived lack of connection, and if connection is two people accepting each other for who they are, then connection relies on authenticity. So to the best of your ability, you want to let people see you. And I know it is so easier said than done. It is not easy to take off your masks, and it's not easy to let your guard down. But you can do it. And you can do it, you can be strategic in who you do it with. Don't do this with people who who you don't think are capable of seeing you, accepting you, hearing you, right? Like, if these are high-risk individuals who have been abusive in the past or whatever, I don't recommend just being like, hey, here I am without my armor and all that kind of stuff. Like, this isn't about beating yourself up at all, right? So I'm gonna go into what taking responsibility looks like, and I just want to say that there's a lot here. And I don't expect you to remember this all. I don't expect you to have to be able to write it down. I might go too fast for that. So I would just say that if you are a sub, one of the benefits is that there is a sub-only Discord channel that has all of my worksheets, all of my notes from every single stream that I do are there available to you. Alternatively, our YouTube channel has shortened versions of the educational deep dives. They're usually 10 to 12 minutes long, and this is going to be in there. So it's going to be, you'll find it by looking up loneliness on our channel. So, and you can pause it and write it down at your own pace, okay? So you don't have to sub to get the benefit. It's just a little bit more work if you don't sub. Okay, so how to take responsibility for our loneliness. What does that actually look like? What does that mean, Catherine? Okay, so the first thing is you just want to notice your feelings of loneliness. You want to have that awareness. And it's especially helpful if you can be non-judgmental about your pain. Okay, because when we judge ourselves, it just adds a whole other layer of mess to the otherwise messy situation that you don't necessarily have to deal with. So the second step is to be aware of your emotions as transitory. So we tend to perceive emotions as truth or fact. They are not. They are these states that arise and fall in our bodies. And so they are in and of themselves transitory. Nothing's permanent about your loneliness. The third step is to then, to the best of your abilities, unpack the thinking that's causing you to feel lonely, right? So remember, our thinking creates our emotions, which then creates our consequences, our actions. So when you notice you're feeling lonely, you acknowledge it as an emotion, as a transitory thing, and then you ask yourself, what am I telling myself that's making me feel lonely? And once you have those, and you just like brainstorm it, and then you look at those and you challenge their validity, right? You want to know, like, how valid is the stuff that I'm telling myself? Dur, yes, that is exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah, it helps me too when I'm able to do it, which isn't nearly as much as I want, but it does help. So it's really like one of the really common stories that we tell ourselves that leads to loneliness is a shame story. So it's you'll have some version of, I'm not lovable because of X, or, they don't like me because I'm Y, right? So there's some sort of story around why you're not worthy of acceptance that is probably total BS. So step 4 is if you are blaming others for your loneliness, which again is really common, or otherwise just feeling hostile about it, you want to unpack the thinking that's leading to the blame and hostility as well. And you want to challenge that validity as well. And then finally, you want to take steps to connect with others and share your authentic self as much as you can. And again, you can start really small with this. So there was another article that I found by Tony Bernard, and she had like 10 ways that you can 10 things you could try, I guess, when you're feeling lonely that might be helpful. So I'm going to just read off 9 of them, just in case you're like, oh my gosh, that was way too many steps. I am just so not willing today to write down what I'm thinking and like unpack everything. Then you can like enjoy these maybe. So she says, don't blame yourself in any way, shape, or form. Okay, I said that too. It's awesome advice. Seek relief from a non-human friend, your dogs or your cats, if they aren't plotting to kill you. Random. That's awesome! That is so inspiring. I want a steady meditation practice because I know how important it is. Right? Like it teaches you this whole reality of thoughts being just thoughts and not facts, that they rise and they fall, and you have much more control and awareness over what's going on in here. Yeah. Well, maybe I'll try that. Oh, I love it. Way to go, Dur. Way to go. So of course she says, hey, more gifties. Oh my, random. Oh my. Random, your generosity is not so random. I love it. Yeah, so okay, seek relief from your non-human friends. Connect with a friend if you can. Okay, so do something creative, no matter how simple. Help someone in need. Call to mind others who are feeling lonely and send them kind and compassionate thoughts. So it's Valentine's Day. It is totally acceptable, right, to like send somebody a happy thought. You can visualize someplace you'd like to be and see if just for a moment you can feel happy for those who are there. And you can treat loneliness as an old friend who's dropped in for a visit despite not having received an invitation. And you can remind yourself that life is not always fun and that tomorrow is a new day. So yeah, I like those. So here's the exercise, should you choose to accept it. And it's a good one. There's a lot of research backing up why showing that this is actually highly beneficial to do. It's a gratitude letter, and this particular version of it comes from the Greater Good in Action, which is out of UC Berkeley, and their positive psychology work. So the whole purpose is that this will boost your well-being by boosting your happiness, and that the effects of this last even up to 6 weeks later, and some studies are showing that it could last for months. One thing you do can boost your happiness for at minimum 6 weeks. Amazing. Okay, so here's what you're doing. You're writing a gratitude letter, and you're going to recall someone who did something for you that you are grateful for, but to whom you haven't yet expressed that sincere gratitude. Ideally, this is somebody you're able and willing to meet with in person sometime in the next week. So if that's not something you're going to do or want to do, so I'll just say we're going to write a letter of thanks, and then you're actually going to go and read it to the person in person. If that is something that you just don't want to do, that's fine. You might not feel the happiness for 6 weeks, but you're still gonna get a boost in your well-being by simply writing the letter and sending it off, or just writing the letter and not sending it off. So really you're at choice with any and all of this. So you wanna write the letter following these rough guidelines. So you're gonna address them personally, so like dear so-and-so or hey so-and-so. And you don't wanna worry too much about spelling and grammar, like that is not the purpose. But what you want to do is describe what they did for you and why you are grateful and how their behavior affected your life for the better. And you want to be as specific as possible. You then want to take it, so you're describing what they did for you, why you're grateful, how it affected you, and you're being specific as possible. And then you're going to say, this is what you're doing now in your life, and this is how what they did for you is still impacting you. And you want to just keep it to one page, so less than 300 words or about 300 words, right? Pretty, like, they're so straight simple. Address them directly. So dear so-and-so, hey so-and-so, what's up so-and-so. You're going to describe what it is they did for you, why you're grateful, and how that has affected your life. And then you're going to describe what you're currently doing and how it continues to affect you. That's it. It's pretty straightforward. Right? So then, if you are willing to, this is where, again, you'll experience the most boost in your well-being, you want to plan to visit them in person. So you want to let them know that you want to meet with them and that you have something special to share, but you don't want to reveal exactly what you're going to do, right? So, hey, I want to get together. I have something special that I want to share with you that I think you're going to like. And then, like, in your own words, obviously. And then when you meet them, you're going to let them know that you're grateful to them and that you want to express it by reading a letter that you wrote to them. And when I first heard this, I was like, dude, that is so weird. That is so weird. I'm really uncomfortable showing up to somebody and like being like, hey, can I read you what I wrote to you? Right? But then I thought what it would feel like if I was them and someone did that to me. It would feel awesome. It would feel awesome. And I would be so touched. So that helped me get over that. So then you want to read the letter. And you want to make sure that just before you do it, you ask them to refrain from making any comments until you're done so that you can get through it. And while you're reading it, you want to take your time. You want to be aware or paying some attention to how you're feeling. And you want to just be paying attention as much as you can to their reactions, their visual reactions. And once you're done, you open it up and you have a conversation and you discuss what it was like together. And then you give them the letter before you leave. So again, the reason why this is here on our Loneliness Day is because it is a way of powerfully connecting with another human being. And it takes care of you. It makes you feel connected. You're being authentic, right? You're taking a risk. You're being vulnerable. And you're saying, hey, this is how you made my life better. You're appreciating someone. All of that is risky. And what you get back, but it's a very easy thing for people to be positively impacted by. So the chances of you having a good reaction that fosters connectivity is higher than if you were doing a different behavior. So it sets you up for success is what I'm saying. And it's been shown scientifically to boost your well-being for weeks and make you more happy. So I have a final thought about this. And it's that, I don't know, so I don't have children, and I get less now, but I tend to get asked a lot, why am I not having kids or when I'm going to have them? And I'm not planning on having them. And one of the things that scares me about that is being alone when I'm dying. And I am the youngest in my family. I'm younger than Yeti Dude by 14 days, right? Women tend to live longer, so I can see myself in a realistic future where everybody that's currently in my life that mean the world to me, I might outlive all of them. And if I don't have kids, I could be alone in the end. And that tends to scare me. And I've heard so many times that, how to put it, that even with people there, I'm glad. I was going to say I'm glad I'm not alone in my fear, but I don't wish it on you either, Dur. There's just this idea that, even if you do have people around you on your deathbed, you're still ultimately alone. And I have an idea, I have a thought that is shifting all of that fear for me. And it's connected to loneliness. And it's basically that I actually don't think that Yeti Dude. No! I am the cat planning your downfall. I don't know. How do cats clean themselves? I don't know. Okay, so here's my big thought, right? Is that none of us are ever truly alone because we have ourselves. So I only really feel alone when I really, when I'm meditating or I have clarity around the experience of loneliness. Yes, I will generate this feeling for myself when I'm telling myself stories about how everybody's rejecting me or how someone in particular has rejected me. But then I'm able to let that go because I'm able to analyze my thoughts and realize that they're not valid, and I can just let it go, right? And then when I'm still left with loneliness, what I realize is that everything that helps me connect to another human being, I'm not doing for myself. I'm not connecting with myself. I am disconnected inside. So I'm wondering if people who on their deathbed feel alone, that they're feeling alone because they're disconnected from their own emotional reality and they're somehow rejecting themselves. Okay, I feel like that's a big thought. And I just think that there's potentially an opportunity to give ourselves the connection we're craving. And we can do that by paying attention to how we feel, by, practicing non-judgment about who we are and how we feel. Try to understand ourselves and treat ourselves the way we would treat someone we care about instead of someone we hate. That we can actually give ourselves the acceptance, and we can help ourselves feel loved and heard and understood by giving ourselves that gift, if that makes any sense. So here's my final little thought is, you remember the gratitude letter I just walked us through? My challenge to you guys, should you choose to accept it, is to write that gratitude letter to yourself. Use it as an exercise to connect to yourself. and just see how that affects your loneliness if it does. Because I don't know, like this is not something that I know of that's been studied. It was just an idea that came to me. So yeah, that's our loneliness for the day. Ta-da! Yeah, does anybody have any questions? Or any like thoughts you want to throw out there? You know, I do a lot of research to prepare for my streams, but I by no means can do comprehensive research, so no doubt there is stuff out there that contradicts or challenges what I've said that I might not be aware of, but that you might be aware of, and I would really appreciate to know about it. Being able to share evidence-based approaches to well-being is very important to me. So the more you guys can help me with that, the better. I think we're all just all gonna be, which is